Hey everybody, welcome back. It's been a long time.
Way too long.
Way too long. I think, what has this been, a month and a half?
Wow.
Michael just walked into my door. We cracked open some drinks. We're about to get recording. Yeah, got a lot of, it's going to be, I think, a very interesting episode. Big news for both of us. We both just got back from being abroad. Michael got back from his honeymoon.
Technically, yes.
Technically, yeah.
Technically abroad.
Technically abroad. Michael, less technically, you're in South America.
Yes.
And then for me, I just got back about a week ago from Lebanon. So it's good to be back. It's good to be recording again. And yeah, we got some alcohol flowing. So yeah, I think sure you'll hear the true unfiltered opinions brought to you courtesy of alcohol. But yeah, we're very excited to get into it. And so take it away, Michael.
Yeah, being abroad on your honeymoon, going to Lebanon for reserve duty, basically the same thing.
Same thing, yeah. Just a bunch of laughs and jokes and craziness, yeah.
Only one of those do you need a passport to go on, but
It's true, yeah. Only one of us got the stamp, unfortunately. But maybe one day.
Maybe one day.
Maybe one day get the Lebanese stamp as well. Who knows?
So I think for this episode, because of your experience in Lebanon, and for our listeners out there, I very much force myself not to ask Dillon any questions about Lebanon until this episode, so you can hear it fresh with me, and we can hear it for the first time.
All the reactions are genuine.
All the reactions are genuine, except for the ones that are not.
Except
only
for Michael lies.
except for the times that I lie. No, in all seriousness, all of the reactions are genuine. This is a raw conversation, first time that Dylan and I are really speaking about this in full. And for this episode, we're gonna do a little bit more of an interview format where I'm gonna ask Dylan about his experience, and we're gonna dive into the past month and a half.
Yeah, freestyling a little bit, kind of see where it goes.
So I guess let's start chronologically. Let's start from the very beginning. How do you remember this whole thing started?
So, I got called in the Miluim, or into reserve duty, on October 1st. Which wasn't, to be honest, it wasn't so much of a shock. They had told us from end of February when we left our last cycle in reserve duty that we would be coming back for Lebanon. They had told us Lebanon was going to happen in the summer. Obviously, that didn't happen. Up until our most recent episode, every episode had contained the running joke of will they, won't they, and finally they did. And it was, how the IDF did it. I'm sure everybody remembers the end of September. There was the assassination. Well, going back middle of September, there was the assassination of Fuad Shukar, which we talked about a lot in our last episode.
Right.
A couple weeks later, there was then the attack with the pagers, the exploding pager attack, which I'm sure will go down in history as one of the most insane and legendary Secret Service operations in history. That was then culminated by the death of Nasrallah, along with the assassination of several other high-ranking Hezbollah commanders, generals, field operators. And the IDF had the momentum. And they realized, okay, it's kind of a now or never situation. Like, Hezbollah is completely disorganized, in disarray, completely disorganized. I had mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, of course, it was a brilliant attack. It seemed like it was very much they kind of got caught or about to get caught with the pagers and then later the walkie-talkies. And it was sort of a use it or lose it type situation, which on the one hand, the attack itself, I have very little criticism of it. I know a lot of people when the attack happened, a lot of, typical Israeli critics came out saying, well, what if one of them had been on a plane? There certainly were some civilian deaths, including, I believe, the death of a child of one of the operatives, which is tragic. But overall, I would say it was a very targeted attack. The vast majority of deaths and injured were Hezbollah operatives, Hezbollah members, Hezbollah commanders. Certainly, the resulting aerial bombardment result in civilian deaths, but ultimately I have to give the IDF and the military credit where they're due, and it was a great attack. Naturally, when your enemy is, they're on the back foot and you have momentum, you have to move forward. And I knew in the off, they had told us as well. They said, be ready. We're very likely to call you up.
And maybe just remind our listeners what unit you serve in and the sort of stuff that you do, as much as you're able to.
Yeah, of course. So I'm in the Yalom special unit, which is a kind of, there's no American equivalent of it. It's a special forces unit within the Combat Engineering Brigade. Basically, what Yalom does is, the main job, I would say, is the tunnels. It also involves the sapper unit, and sappers can be connected to a Yalom team, or they can be connected to nearly any team. Oftentimes, when there was the ambush early on in the Lebanese war that killed about 8 EGOS operatives, there was also one Yalom death with them as well, and he was a sapper. He was attached to that unit. His job is, of course, to look for IEDs, to dismantle explosives. He's basically the explosive expert within that team. But he is trained in Yalom. He goes through that training, and then separately joins another team, which in this case was the elite reconnaissance unit within the Golani Brigade. And then, of course, there's anything to do with demolitions. Oftentimes, it's demolitions that are taking place behind enemy lines. It's demolitions that are being done to more sensitive targets. So things like radio towers, things that will require a little bit more know-how in order to protect both yourself and the other team. And yeah, that's essentially, in a nutshell, what Yalom does. And so our job is, as combat engineers, is very important, but we don't work with, in the way that the typical combat engineering brigade will work with large pieces of equipment. We tend to work more as smaller teams on the ground, which gives us a lot more maneuverability. So that's basically what our team does. October 1st, kissed our families goodbye, went to base, and it was certainly a different atmosphere than last time.
I want to stop you there before we jump into going to base. You mentioned a second ago that it didn't come as a total surprise, the notice that you guys had to go back, because you were already somewhat mentally preparing even for a war over the summer, and then when it ultimately happened, it wasn't completely out of nowhere. But take me back to that moment when you get that phone call or text message. I don't know how they reached out to you and told you to go back to base, how you felt, what you were thinking about.
So I was actually sitting on the couch after work one evening with my wife. Our son was already in bed, so it was probably about like 8 or 9 o'clock, and we get the text message from my officer saying, all right, tomorrow be at base at this time. And I showed her the message, and it was just sort of like, okay, here we go. It wasn't the same shock and devastation that we felt after October 7th. So when we got the message the night of October 7th that we would be called up, it was much more expected. And unlike October 7th, where we were the ones on the back foot, now suddenly we were the aggressors, and Hezbollah was on the back foot. So going into it, you feel much more secure. You feel like the army really knows what it's doing, and there's a much greater feeling of confidence. Not only that, but now you have an entire IDF force that has combat experience. The officers now have live combat experience. The soldiers, everybody, a lot of the gear I have now, I own a lot of my own gear because I purchased it because I wanted to, or it was donated to me because I wanted as best the gear as possible when I was in Gaza. So a lot of the gear I had was already sitting in my closet. So it was a different feeling. It was a different feeling going. You felt a lot more confident. It was sort of, here we go again type thing. And getting to base and seeing everybody was, after October 8th, and I think you ask anybody who got called up after October 8th, everybody's signing gear with tears in their eyes. This was not that. There was a much more organized, euphoric feeling. Not euphoric, but organized, excited feeling, I would say. The preparation was much shorter as well. We, I think, spent maybe 3 or 4 nights on base before we ended up going up north, just to kind of do a little refresh as well with some training. But it was we were very quickly moving from base to the staging area up in the north. which the staging area for us actually was a beautiful area, Kibbutz Ein Gev, which is in normal times a fantastic tourist spot, complete with hotels and villas and restaurants, and it's a kibbutz. But there's nobody there, so we kind of had the place to ourselves. The weather was still hot. We had a beach that was about a 3-minute walk from where we were sleeping. So we'd hop in the Sea of Galilee, splash around. Yeah, it was very nice. At night, we do more training, more preparation. We had a lot of meetings, things like that. But we also had a lot of time to ourselves, and we took full advantage of it by swimming in the Sea of Galilee and just spending time together and hanging out. And it was really, really lovely, actually. It's really lovely. And the people at Kibbutz Ein Gev, I can't thank them enough. They were incredibly gracious hosts. And the funny thing was, they would tell us, okay, tomorrow we're going in. And then tomorrow would come and say, okay, it got pushed back 24 hours. Okay, it got pushed back another 24 hours. We ended up being there for, I think, about 3-4 nights before we actually went in because it just kept getting delayed. The reason for that was due to the IDF's overall military strategy. So the way it worked, and I guess, if you try and imagine the Lebanese-Israeli border, it starts in the Mediterranean Sea and then moves east in a more or less straight line until it gets to a certain point, I think about 80 kilometers in, probably less than that actually, but not so far in, and then it almost has a 90-degree turn north. So the way it worked is if you imagine it kind of like a backwards capital L. And so from the line running west to east, they had 2 divisions. And they had 2 divisions on the line running north to south. And the way the IDF decided to do this was they were only going to have 2 divisions active at one time. So it was either the west to east divisions would go in, and then they would come out for a week, and then the north to south divisions would go in, those 2, and then they would go out for a week. So it was kind of a 2-and-2 type situation. The reason was never explained to us directly. My guess simply is that the IDF is a bit overstretched, and they just simply couldn't support 4 active divisions at one time, in addition to the West Bank, in addition to Gaza, in addition to everything else going on. So they just found it more logistically feasible to have only 2 divisions working at one time rather than 4 at the same time. Or it could have been the IDF is being generous to the reservists, and they understand that we're a little bit weaker. We're mostly civilians, so for us, spending nonstop time in is more difficult, and you might have maybe more accidents or more soldiers not willing to really give it their all. And so to have a week in, week out, kind of that resting period as well, in order to keep your soldiers as sharp and active and capable as possible. It also might have come into account. I don't know. But anyway, that was the situation. So we were on the north. We were part of the North to South Division. We were Division 91, and we were kind of the northernmost unit within that division. We were attached to a Golani unit called the Alexandrani Brigade, which Alexandrani, for anyone who closely follows Israeli news, they've very much taken on a legendary status amongst the reservists. They have done, I think in the past, since October 7th, probably close to 8 months of reserve duty. So we'd only done 4.5, 5. So they've done almost twice as much as we have. And some of it was up in the north, just patrolling the border, but a lot of it was in Gaza as well. I think they spent 2 months in Gaza in the height of the summer. And so these guys are battle hardened. They're Golani, and Golani, the most equivalent unit I can think would be like the Marine Corps. These guys they're the ones that get the worst gear, but they have the spirit de corps. They have that sort of like warrior mentality that even though they're kind of treated like crap and they're kind of have the stereotype of being maybe dumb and crazy, there's a lot of respect for them because these guys are just willing to take on the most dangerous missions and do their business that way. So we felt very fortunate to be attached with them. And these guys, I never worked with them before. I've never worked with Golani before. They were absolute baboons. But like they would go into a house, they'd clear the house, and then they'd immediately take off their vests and helmets and start smoking cigarettes and shouting and joking at each other. Like they were absolute baboons. But at the same time, they're exactly the guys you want when it hits the fan. So we felt very fortunate to be with them.
So I want to, if we're already talking about going through houses in Lebanon, let's talk about that moment where you crossed the border, you went from the staging area into Lebanese territory, and what that was like.
So unlike Gaza, which was a total mess, in terms of going to the staging area, figuring out which unit we were supposed to be with, kind of going in and out a little bit. This happened very quickly. Once the light went green, we went to the staging area. They told us at this hour we're going to be crossing the border. We're going to meet up. We're going to attach ourselves to one of the companies, and then together we're all going to cross the border. And it happened exactly like that. I mean, from the minute we got to Kiryat Shmona, which is one of the northernmost cities in Israel, from the minute we got there, our transport trucks came, picked us up, brought us to the staging area right on the other side of the border. They told us, okay, you guys have 3 hours to sleep. They brought us dinner, like actually a nice dinner. You have 3 hours to sleep, waking up at 11, and we're crossing. It's exactly what happened. So I was very impressed with just, like I said, everyone's got common experience. That includes logistics people as well, because logistics is half the army. It may be a little more than half the army. And it was all on time. It was all scheduled. It felt very professional. And so we crossed the border at night. We found the company very quickly. Within 30 minutes of linking up with them, we all crossed the border together. The border crossing, because it's at night, so there's, yes, we have night vision, but there's only so much you can really see. Typical war noises, explosions, this and that. We get to some orchard, I think, at about 3, 4 in the morning. It's okay, we're sleeping here tonight. So we slept in the orchard, and we're all pulling guard duty, of course, but just that first day in, it was just kind of watching everything happening from this kind of elevated position, hidden in these trees. And after that, at some point, we all moved down into the city we were going to, that the Alexandroni Brigade was ordered to conquer, which is called Jabo. And we were starting with the outskirts of these houses. And first off, I have to say, just being in, even though it was just across the border, it is a beautiful country. And I have to say, the people who live there, one thing I noticed with the Lebanese is, at least the ones in both the places that we were, which is Jabo, and then later it was Hule, which is a village right next to Jabo. The houses, I mean, the Lebanese there really invest in their houses. They look gorgeous. There's a clear motivation for aesthetic beauty. And some of these houses, I mean, they were villas that if you had picked them up and placed them in Virginia, they would cost you probably $3-4 million. Like, they were huge, beautiful, with these columns and stones, and the interior was decorated with beautiful paintings, pictures, and it was very, very nice. More than a few times, we kind of looked at each other and were like, "Wow, what a pity! Like, really, what a pity that these guys were supporting a organization that was hell-bent on destroying Israel, because if they had just wanted to live in peace, like, this is the kind of place where I would want to come on vacation. I'd want to take I could even see, like, wow, I'd love to be able to raise a family here. It's that nice. It's very much in nature. And anyways,
it's funny you mentioned that. There's somebody who I follow on social media who published a post saying something along the lines of, I don't agree, of course, with what Hamas did or the terrible actions that they carried out and why they carried out those actions. But at the end of the day, they're an organization where, from their perspective, they look at the Israelis as being these foreign conquerors that are taking their land. And while I, of course, don't agree with them, one could very objectively understand the chain of events that led Hamas to make the decisions that it made. Mm-hmm. But you have to ask, when you look at an organization like Hezbollah, which doesn't have any internationally accepted territorial claim against Israel, and is not fighting a real resistance against the state of Israel, you look at this organization and you say, okay, you guys have thrown in your lot with a battle that's not yours to fight.
Yeah, and what's worse, if they've made both themselves and their entire country, I would say, the pawns of the Iranians, who, we can get into the Iranians and the whole concept of revolutionary Islam, and I get it, don't get me wrong, but you're absolutely right. It is a battle that does not necessarily need to be fought.
So I actually want to, but before we get into the nitty-gritty of specific experiences beyond that first night, where you said you slept in an orchard, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I want to actually take you back to that orchard because you mentioned it very casually when you went over the things. You said, yeah, we crossed the border after we did some training, slept in an orchard in Lebanon, and then went on to start clearing out houses in Lebanon. And you mentioned it very casually with, as if it's like something that one does on every
trip, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's how a typical Wednesday morning looks like.
Yeah, for sure.
Take me back to the orchard. You're sleeping in an orchard in Lebanon. You're looking up. I would imagine you're looking up at either I don't know, trees or sky. You try to go to sleep that night. What's crossing your mind?
So, to be honest, that's a good question. I don't really remember if anything really crossed my mind at that point, because also, because it's middle of the night, you could be anywhere, right? I mean, the other thing too is, you and I live in Tel Aviv, right? So nighttime for us it's not really nighttime. The city's so bright at night that you can always see where you're going. There's always street lights and building lights, and you talk about light pollution in urban areas. But when you're in the middle of an area like a countryside, darkness is dark. It is black. It is the kind of night that that terrified our ancestors. But as a result of it, you couldn't really see or appreciate where you were. I think it wasn't until the next morning. Even then, so much. It wasn't until we actually started moving into the city, into the Lebanese city, Maisel Jabal, that we really felt like, oh my God, we're in Lebanon right now. In the meantime, it's kind of business as usual. It's the typical pulling guard duty that we all know. It's you're trying even if you can't sleep, you just close your eyes because even that is a type of rest that's better than nothing. So I can't remember what I was thinking so much. I don't really think something too crazy had crossed my mind at that point. I was definitely curious about what was going to happen. I was curious about what our job was going to be. On the one hand, I was curious about what our job was going to be. On the other hand, though, I know how Yalom operates, which is because we are common engineering, our job was focused very much on the overall mission of the IDF, which was to find any Hezbollah military weapons and destroy them, and also to destroy any potentially strategic buildings that might pose a threat to us. We're not there like Golani is to kill Hezbollah fighters. That's not our job. We're not frontline fighters. We typically go in after them, which is why we said we linked up with another company. That company led us into... We were the last unit, essentially, within the whole Alexandroni Brigade to go into Lebanon. But the next morning when we woke up, we started moving in, and we were very much alone. The company had left to go do their mission, and we had our mission, which was a certain set of houses that we were supposed to take over. For me on my team, I'm one of the 2-point gunners. There's another guy we switch off usually. So for me being first inside the house, I love this stuff. I love the adrenaline. I love the excitement. And again, like I said, because it's not our first time doing this, you don't have the same fear and terror. Most likely you're not going to encounter anybody. You still prepare yourself, of course. You still move cautiously. You still do that. You still check your corners, and you still, all of that. But you're not so likely to meet anybody. And sure enough, we went into a house, and there was nobody. No weapons either. And to be honest, I was not surprised. I figured, I'm guessing 1 in 10 homes we're going to find something. This house didn't have any. But what it did have, it had a stove with a gas on it, so I cooked everybody spaghetti and pasta, or spaghetti and coffee, which is nice. The reason why I ended up cooking everybody spaghetti and coffee is because we ended up getting word that the common engineering regulars who were attached to do a different unit, they were supposed to build for us a logistics route. But one of the brilliant officers in charge there decided it would be a good idea to drive one of the D9 bulldozers through an anti-tank minefield, which went about as well as you expected. Nobody got hurt, thankfully. These machines are massive and powerful, but the machine was unable to move. So we ended up having 3 days being in Lebanon without any logistics resupply. So we kind of had a scavenge mentality a little bit, trying to both ration our own supplies that we were carrying with us, while also keeping an eye open for any sealed and unopened bottles of water or any kind of food that we might be able to nourish ourselves with inside these homes.
And did you feel any nerves up to this point? Do you remember any distinct moments up to the point that you're describing? We were in the house making that coffee on the stove, where you remember these moments as being distinctly impactful, or moments of anxiety, or moments of
Nothing particular. One thing that did end up happening was there was an explosion, not too far from us, not too close, but not too far either, and a bit of shrapnel actually landed between. Like, two of my good friends were sitting and talking, and the piece of shrapnel just landed right between them.
wow.
Which, if it had been, a few feet or 2 feet left or right, it would be a very different story. But it just kind of landed between them. That was sort of like the oh shit moment. One of my buddies actually he ended up keeping the shrapnel just as a little memento.
Wow. And they were sitting outside.
They were sitting outside. Yeah, the whole. This was, I think, while me and my squad were taking over the house. They were kind of chilling. And but yeah, we go in, but that was about it. Other than that, it was back to pulling guard duty around the house, and from that point on, we ended up, we went deeper and deeper into the village, and we were taking more and more houses. And I think it was our second house actually we walked into, and we found several AK-47 rifles, and for me it was like, wow. Like, oh my God, they actually have rifles here. And the third house, more rifles. More, not just rifles, but like military uniforms, military to-go bags, grenades. Fourth house or fifth house, they had mortars, they had anti-personnel mines, anti-tank mines,
wow.
claymores. Sixth house, RPGs, heavy machine guns, like, I was in disbelief. It was the opposite of what I expected. Rather than 1 in 10 having military equipment, 1 in 10 didn't have military equipment.
Wow.
And and also too, the thing with this military equipment is a lot of it was wrapped in nylon. A lot of it even had the purchase orders attached to them as well, which were, interestingly enough, were written in English. Which I after being back and reading it in my research, I think I understand why. Because some of the guys even ask the question, they're like, is this American? Like, what's going on? Why is it in English?
Right.
But it was a lot of that, and yeah, as we went deeper and deeper, we found more and more equipment. We started finding tunnels. I mean, it was very clear to us that while this was a city, it started to take on the characteristic for me of like a military base, like you would find maybe in the United States, like at Fort Hood or Camp Pendleton. Because yes, those are training facilities, those are military facilities, but within them they also have neighborhoods where soldiers and officers and their families sleep. And so, the question I asked myself, I'm like, okay, if you were to attack a residential house inside of a military base, is that a legit military target? And I would make the argument that, yeah, it is. It's probably not the most effective place to attack if your objective is to take over Camp Pendleton, but it's still a military target. And I look at a lot of these houses, like, not only are these places where potential fighters are sleeping, but they're actually it's like a mini armory inside each house. And the other thing that was inside each house, which also took me aback, was every single house had a large, beautifully framed photo, painting, even a couple times weaving of Nasrallah.
Wow.
And I also equated it to when I lived in the States. When you walk inside one of your Christian friends' homes, what's the first thing you see?
Yeah, a picture of Jesus.
Picture of Jesus.
Yeah.
Big, beautiful picture of Jesus. I mean, the place that this guy had in the lives of the Shia in Lebanon was less of like a leader and more of almost a messiah, like a father figure, the father, the protector. I don't think I really appreciated or understood the impact that his death must have had on Hezbollah. And sure enough, we're going through it. The first few days, no encounters. First 2 nights, we're sleeping outside. By the third night, we kind of found like a home, small enough one that was small enough for our team to kind of like manage and guard. And that kind of became our home. We slept in there.
And what about civilians in this area?
No. They had fled. My guess was probably a couple months ago. probably around the same time that, even longer than that, probably around the same time that the Israeli civilians left as well. That you had a lot of civilians on the border that were gone. To be honest, it's hard for me to say because the houses were pretty immaculate. So I don't know exactly when they must have left. It didn't look like homes that had not been lived in for a year. But what do I know? I don't know if I've never seen a home that hasn't lived in for a year, so maybe they hadn't been. But we didn't encounter civilians. The first few days, we didn't encounter any Hezbollah fighters either. By I think the fourth or fifth day, the battalion that we were with started getting attacked. Usually by groups of 2 to 6 guys. Very small scale, squad operated kind of attacks. And we've been hearing about them happening to other battalions as well within our brigade. So now it finally hit us as well.
And these were terrorists that were mainly based inside this town that you were in, or they were coming from...
Good question. My guess was they were locals. Probably people who were either just fanatics, maybe religious fanatics who were ready to die, ideologues who were ready to die for the same reason, or people who had been living, whose families had been living and ancestors had been living in Mizil Jabal for so many generations that their identity was just so tied to this area that they couldn't conceive of themselves not being there, and they didn't care that it was an entire brigade coming in after them. They were going to stand and fight. So there's, obviously when you have an entire IDF battalion against 2 or 3 guys, or 6 guys even, those 6 guys are going to lose. However, there is an advantage to being a smaller team when you're against a larger team. The larger team, generally in the military, there's a lot of coordination required. Movements have to be very organized. Everybody has to know where everybody else is, because the last thing you want is to accidentally shoot somebody who's in the IDF. Whereas if you're 1 or 2 guys, you can move around very freely. You're not worried about friendly fire incidents. You can kind of jump up, throw a grenade, fire a couple shots, run to another house, do the exact same thing. You can just kind of keep moving that way, which, again, you're not going to stop a battalion, or you're unlikely to stop an entire battalion, but you can do some damage. If you're in the right place at the right time,
right,
you can do some damage.
And that's their goal. Their goal is to do maximum damage and survive as long as they can.
Exactly right, yeah. And so our battalion, we got very lucky. We did have several injuries. No deaths, but several injuries. There was one particular battle where a few Hezbollah fighters had found themselves in a 3-story building. 5 guys got shot.
Wow. 1
guy in the back, 1 in the leg. There was a grenade that was thrown that caused some damage to, I think, someone's torso. Most of the plate carrier that they carry in the vest absorbed the impact, but there was still some damage from the shrapnel. And then 2 guys one guy got hit in the nuts, actually, with the shrapnel. And so they were carrying him out on the stretcher, loading him up on the car. And I heard this from a buddy of mine who was basically the radio man for the battalion commander. So great guy to be friends with, because he has access to all the information. Right. So he told me after, he said, yeah, so basically they carried this guy, loaded him onto the Hummer to get him out of there. And one of the officers noticed that one of the guys carrying the stretcher, he had blood all over his legs. And they were like, oh my God, you're injured. Like, get on the Hummer. The guy's like, no, I'm not getting on the Hummer. I'm fine. Don't worry about it. Guy basically, from what it sounded like, basically gunpoint forced him onto the Hummer. And they found out later at the hospital that he had a .762 bullet in one of his balls.
What?
I mean, the guy was a maniac. Like, the fact he was ready to keep going, ready to keep fighting. But, I mean, yeah, he had a whole bullet. It's, but yeah, that was one of the encounters. And the funny thing, too, with these gun battles, in the movies, they always happen so quickly, right? You always see, like, within a couple minutes, the bad guys run in front, or exactly where you want them to run, and you shoot them, and that's that. But obviously, in real life, nobody wants to get shot. And so everybody's kind of, like, hunkered down and staying in their areas and taking pot shots and kind of waiting for somebody else to make a move. And it's a little bit like chess in that way. And so these gun battles would go on for 2 hours. And a lot of times, too, you wanted to get involved sometimes. But it's irresponsible to do so, because once you have too many guys in the same unit on the field, once again, you're just more likely to shoot each other. One of the biggest issues in the IDF is because there's such close quarter fighting, is that friendly fire is so prevalent, and the IDF really tries to make sure that doesn't happen by limiting the amount of soldiers engaged in attack at one time. And at the same time, as much as there's a party that wants to be in, there's also a party when you get the order like no, stay put. That you're like, okay, thank God. You're also very happy too. Like, not me. There was one major incident that we were involved in, and it's by hands down the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. We were inside this massive villa that the battalion commander had kind of claimed as his base of operations, and there was a gun battle just a couple houses down, where I guess they had a team of Hezbollah fighters who were shooting, and Golani was shooting back, and they were both inside the house, but the Hezbollah fighters were in one room, the Golani fighters were in another room, and they're just kind of shooting around a corner at each other. And nobody really knew what to do. So there was a lot of talk of, well, do we have these guys pull out, we put a tank, and then they decided to send in Yalom. So we had already had a tunnel wired up with mines, basically, with anti-tank mines. And our officer came, picked the point team, so me, myself, and our kind of squad leader, the three of us, along with three other guys. They said, go into the tunnel, get the mines, go in the house. Plant the mines in the house, against the wall where the Hezbollah fighters are, pull the pin, get out of there. And so we're like, okay, let's do it. So this is the middle of the night. We go to where the mines are, and we're one house over from the shooting style, so we can hear the shooting, it's yelling and this and that, and it's just like my heart was racing. I was pulling, I guess, I don't know what you call it in English, but I was providing cover so that my team go in and out. So I was kind of like looking down this alley with the night vision on, and I remember my officer coming to me being like, "Just let him come to you, Dillon." I was like, "Oh yeah, slow and steady, come to daddy." And and it's funny, you're making jokes in these moments, but got the mines, go to the house, and it's funny because it felt like a movie moment. We're running down the street, we see an entire Golani company running the opposite way towards us. We go to the house, and it's just chaos. I mean, it's just shooting, officers are screaming, trying to control and give orders and make sure those orders are heard, and this and that. Eventually, me and on my squad, the three of us, we take a position, start shooting, and the other three guys come in, go into the house, pushing the mines up against the wall where the terrorists are on the other side. And one guy, this guy on my team, he absolutely loves this stuff. His name's Yam. He is just an adrenaline junkie. He's crawling down the hallway towards them, pushing the mines deeper and deeper. And our officer's standing there, "Yam, get your ass back! What are you doing? Get back here!" Like screaming at him. We pull the pin. It's connected to a explosive wire, which gives us about a 15-second time delay. We sprint out of the house, turn the corner. I turn around because I see a bunch of Golani guys just kind of there, like up against the corner. I turn to yell at them, like, run, move, and then all of a sudden, just boom, this massive explosion. Like, it felt like Hollywood, right in front of just this sideways explosion, right in front of our face. And instead of me saying words, I just kind of did like a whoo, like one of those things. I was just, oh my God, it was such a crazy moment. And we went back to the battalion commander's house, and it was just, for the six of us, it was just this feeling of euphoria. Like, oh my God, I can't believe we did that. That was insane. Because, we make it back and everybody's okay. And I've read about this where, guys, they do missions like this, they come back and just this feeling of euphoria, which I never really experienced myself, but it's unlike anything. It's unlike any kind of drug. You just like, oh my God, you just feel so alive and so just, I don't know, just like powerful and in control and this and that, and just, it's amazing. And they sent a drone in afterwards in the house. So actually, after we left, a tank fired a shell just to, put a cherry on the cake. But they sent a drone in, and they found they found three Hezbollah bodies. 2 guys managed to escape, but there was a high altitude drone that was watching them leave and blew them up while they were leaving too. So there had been a total of 5 guys in the house. As far as we know, maybe who knows, it could have been more, but at least 5, and none of them survived. So it was definitely a good day for the IDF and for us in the Alexandroni Brigade. And Unfortunately, there is a sadder part to the story, which is the reason this whole firefight got started was because this was a house that they were, planning on clearing, and they did it correctly. They sent in a dog first, and as the dogs went into the house, the dog got shot. And so, as I didn't see this personally, but I heard from other people that as we were leaving, there was a Golani soldier carrying the dog on his shoulder, and the dog's handler was just bawling his eyes out. Like, it's a unit called Okits. They handle these dogs. The guy just falling along behind him, just crying his eyes out. And yeah, I mean, I can't imagine, like, you're paired with these dogs, and then to have the dog die,
Right.
That's got to be horrible. But at the end of the day, that's their job, is that they get shot so that everybody can go home to their wives and kids. So it was definitely a sacrifice that we all appreciated. And yeah, but to lighten up the mood a little bit, so funnily enough, when I had heard afterwards that a bunch, when they were deciding what to do, and when they eventually land on setting Yalom, but when they were deciding what they should do, do we do tank, do we do Yalom, this and that, one of the Golani officers says, "Guys, we're Golani. Only a bullet in the head." Rakado berosh. And so it kind of gives you an idea into the mentality of the guys we were with.
Right.
The first round we were in for about 8 days, and yeah, like I said, it really felt, Gaza. Anyone who listens to this podcast knows I have a lot of mixed feelings about Gaza, even from the moment it started, even from October 8th onwards. I had a lot of mixed feelings about Gaza. I mean, you said it yourself. If you follow the chain of events, it's not hard to, at the very least, to empathize with Hamas. With this one, this felt like a war that had to happen. I mean, after seeing all the gear, we found 80-kilo rockets in people's backyards. I mean, these are real high-powered weapons that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
These guys were looking to kill a lot of civilians.
These guys were ready to rock and roll. I mean, it's well known that Hezbollah wanted to do what Hamas did, and Hamas just beat them to the punch. If it had been Hezbollah, I think they would have made it down to Haifa. Easy. They would have made it down to Haifa. I mean, these guys really had just the gear they had, the fact they had military experience, 7 years fighting in Syria. They're much more organized, a lot more of them. I honestly, after seeing all that, I don't know how people in the north slept for as long as they did. I don't know how they slept at night, because it was truly shocking to see just how armed these guys were. And for me, it felt like it was also a war with a clear objective. We're not there to destroy Hezbollah. We're there to destroy as much of their equipment as possible along our border, to make sure that they are unable to turn these villages into staging areas again, to destroy their tunnel system, to really make it so that, look, they'll rebuild eventually. Maybe in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but at least during that time, the people who live in the north can sleep at night. They don't have to worry that in the morning they're going to wake up to Radwan coming over down the mountains on dirt bikes and Humvees with PKKs and snipers and RPGs ready to cause some serious damage to them. So in that sense, I felt very honored to be just a tiny, almost microscopic part of this massive invasion, and I think it was a very justified invasion. And I'm very proud of the IDF, because after the pager attack, had they chosen not to seize the initiative and attack, I would have been extremely disappointed. And my hope is that moving forward, that the IDF isn't going to get a little high on its own supply, because right now, the IDF's riding pretty high right now. They're not going to say, hey, we've done so good, let's push to Litani, let's push to Beirut, let's go and destroy Hezbollah. I'm hoping that they'll take the win, and from there move to a more political solution, which does appear to be happening. It does appear that the negotiations are progressing. I know the Lebanese prime minister said he's hopes in the next weeks or days. I would be shocked if it happens that quickly, but that soon they'll come to some kind of an agreement, which hopefully will change the status quo in southern Lebanon. But we'll see, because at the end of the day, like I said, the Shia leaders aren't just military commanders. They are father figures and messiahs to them, and I can understand, when you wake up every morning with your family and you're having breakfast and hanging above you is a massive photo of Nasrallah, suddenly whatever that guy says is holy, is that his word is law. There is no questioning this guy. He clearly knows best because he's sitting there literally looking over your family while you're eating and enjoying your.
The Shia Lebanese equivalent to the Pope.
I would say so. That's what it appeared to me. Even more so than that. I think equivalent to the Pope if you're an extremely devout Catholic. But yeah, so we'll see kind of where it goes forward from there. And it was we ended up coming out for I think about a week, and then going in again for another week. This time to Hule, which was more high altitude area, and we actually, interesting enough, we found less small arms and a lot more mortars and artillery, and we actually even found this massive gun that apparently, with bullets that were about almost a foot long.
Wow.
And apparently this is an anti-helicopter gun. We found out later. It took like 8 of us to pick it up. It was a massive gun. And again, right?
Anti-helicopter gun.
Because it's high altitude, right? So you got to figure they're a lot closer to helicopters flying over these mountains. There's a good chance they can take one down. Even if they can't take down a helicopter, the amount of ammunition they have for this thing, and just the size of the caliber of this bullet, all you need is, you're also at a very high point on the mountain. All you need is just, a battalion to be within a kilometer of you, within your eyesight, and it's going to be a bad day for them. And,
yeah.
And as we were going through this equipment, I have to say, like, we definitely also had the thought of like, wow, thank God these guys aren't here, because if they were here manning all this equipment, this would be a very different war right now.
Right.
And a much more devastating one for us. But it's clear that when, like in any army, the leadership falls apart, and it's very hard to, as I mentioned earlier, that there's so much organization that's required for a large unit, a large army. In addition to just field officers, you also need massive logistics trains and to keep these guys fed and keep the ammunition flowing, and in order to create, you need people at the top who can create a cohesive strategy that keeps everybody moving. And without that, it all just kind of falls apart. And the other thing that I've heard, and I haven't confirmed this, but from what I've heard from other people, is that a lot of these Hezbollah fighters weren't even Lebanese. A lot of them were Syrian, who had fled Syria and were just looking for work, basically. So they themselves felt real no affinity towards the Shia. They just guys who needed jobs. So for them, the minute you see an entire brigade rolling towards you and there's no one supporting you, the logical decision is just get the hell out of there. And that's definitely what a lot of them did to our benefit. So, yeah, at this point, it seems like the war is winding down for us. We're still going to be kind of stationed in the north as more of a just-in-case kind of force. But it seems like for us, the month of October was really our Lebanon month. And it seems, knock on wood, of course, seems like it's at its end.
So with everything you've experienced, Hezbollah in the months leading up to Israel's ground invasion was portrayed as this ultra enemy, the big enemy that we don't want to fight, the mega terrorists. In your experience, is that an accurate description?
Look, at the end of I can't say, because aside from the story I told you, I was never close to any Hezbollah fighters. I think man for man, they're just as good as us. But armies don't work on man-to-man situations. And so I think what we really saw with Hezbollah was that unlike Hamas, unlike the Palestinian terror organizations, the IDF really took Hezbollah seriously. And we can see the fruits of 18 years of investment in terms of intelligence and counterintelligence that brought us to the point of being able to assassinate their leaders, take out 1,500 of their men even before a single boot gets onto the southern Lebanese soil. Are they still? Had they been a cohesive unit, would they have been the real threat that we talked about? I think they certainly would have. I think 2006 showed us that Hezbollah when they want to defend an area, they're quite good at it, and they have the means to do it. They have quite sophisticated anti-personnel mines, anti-tank mines. We didn't find much night vision with them, a lot less than we expected, honestly, but they have it. So, all they need is maybe one or two guys on watch at night to have that, and they can at least track our movements during the night. Even with their capabilities being so limited, on that second round in Hule that I mentioned, our sister battalion suffered 5 dead because they mortared the base where that battalion commander was living with his team. I mean, it's not hard to see. It takes basic intelligence to be able to see, where all the officers are going and where they're leaving from, and to figure that, okay, that's their headquarters. So even with the limited abilities that they had, they were still able to deduce that this is the headquarters of this battalion. Let's get some orders. Let's bomb it, and they did. And 5 soldiers died as a result. They also found our battalion headquarters as well, but thankfully the mortars missed. So these guys are capable, and like I said, man for man, they're not to be underestimated. There's a larger discussion that takes place about Arab armies in general and the sort of cultural nuances that make large armies difficult in the Arab world. And maybe in our next episode we can kind of dive a little bit deeper into that. But to answer your question overall, the honest answer would be I don't know. But probably.
Yeah. And how long has it been since you came back from round 2?
I think it's been, what's today? Friday? So I think Sunday or Monday, it'll be exactly a week.
It'll be exactly a week.
Yeah.
And you come back from an experience now where you're not fully done. You're going back now for, to be on a rapid response team in case something will happen in the north. But it seems, assuming all goes according to plan, that the major part of this is behind you.
Yeah.
Did anything particularly surprise you in this experience in retrospect?
How easy this transition from civilian to soldier was, and how easy coming home for these breaks are too. Because it was not easy the first time around, and it's actually been the thing I've been most anxious about, was the switch between civilian to soldier and soldier to civilian. I can already tell the switch from soldier to civilian is going to take a little bit of time, because I can kind of feel it already. I'm a lot more anxious than usual. I find it difficult to, prior to Lebanon, I would spend, probably a couple hours every night just sitting and reading and really enjoying myself. I find that harder to do now, to just sit and read. I find myself needing to go outside and walk around. But overall, I think it's going to be a lot easier than the first time around. So that part really surprised me.
Why do you find it harder to sit and read?
I think it's just a little leftover anxiety. I think it'll go away eventually. I mean, Gaza did as well. It eventually left. It just takes a little bit of time. It takes time for your brain to psychologically tell yourself, to tell for your conscious to tell your subconscious that you're safe now. That you don't have to be on fight or flight mode all the time. That you're okay. It's fine. You can relax. You can bury your face in a book, and nothing's going to happen to you. By the way, speaking of which, I actually did bring a book with me into Lebanon as well. I brought the Bible with me. I'm doing a cover-to-cover read of the Bible. And it was funny because the first round of Mizel Jabal, people always laugh at me for reading the book. And in the second round, everybody brought books because it was just so nice to detach for even just a little bit. Because you always get to a location, right? And, waiting for orders. And you're in the Army, so you know what I'm talking about, where everything takes forever.
Yeah.
And so you have a couple hours to go. I just pull the book out of my bag and just start reading. And it was a very interesting experience. I'm reading the King James Bible, by the way, so the Christian English version that's been around for about 400 years. But it's very interesting reading that while in a war in the Middle East, because all you're reading about in the Bible is wars in the Middle East. But the best part is because a lot of guys on my team are religious, and so they were able to we would compare and contrast the sort of Christian to Jewish translations.
What parts of the Bible were you reading?
Just cover to cover.
Cover to cover.
So I think I'm on Kings right now, so I'm about a third of the way done with it.
You moved quick.
I got a lot of reading time, so yeah, so that part was definitely nice. But yeah, it was it like I said, it's an experience that we've been anticipating. It happened. It had to happen. Very happy it happened, and like I said, I'm honored to have been a part of it.
I understand why you're honored, but you also said that you're happy that it happened. Why are you happy that it happened?
I guess I'm happy that it happened because, well, I'm happy it happened the way it did. I'm happy that the invincible aura, kind of what happened to Hezbollah is sort of what happened to the IDF on October 7th. The aura of invincibility that the IDF had was stripped away, and the same thing has happened to Hezbollah now. That aura of invincibility has been stripped away. A lot of, and I think one thing we've seen politically within the state of Israel is that the security establishment now has a lot more credentials, and we're actually seeing them becoming a lot more vocal against the sitting coalition. Suddenly, Ben Gvir and a lot of these guys who had nothing to do with the army, now suddenly their words carry a lot less weight, especially when it's religious Zionists who make up a large portion of the reserves. And you're seeing the IDF and security establishment really, I think, actually standing up a little bit to Netanyahu and his close allies. So I'm happy that that's happened. I'm happy that all this talk of Lebanon, that the IDF really had a real military victory, like a clear-cut military victory. There's no way of going around it. This wasn't one of those typical Middle Eastern, we won, they won. This was a clear-cut IDF win. And anyone who says otherwise is a fool. Again, anything can happen. Don't get me wrong. Things can change overnight. But for right now, as of this recording, on October 31st, happy Halloween, by the way. As of this recording, it certainly is a victory, at least on that theater. So I'd say that's why I'm happy that happened the way it did.
Do you feel that you're able to fully bring yourself back to civilian life, knowing that you have that 1% part of you that's thinking, maybe when I'm on this rapid response team for the next 2 weeks that I might get called back?
No, I mean, I don't fully bring myself back to civilian life. I don't want to bring myself fully back to civilian life just yet. Like, there's still, I still am in reserves, and I still will be with the team. And I want to, my main thing is I want to try and enjoy that time as much as possible, because it's really easy to sink down into this sort of depression of the army and this sucks and I want to go home and but to really try and take advantage of this time. I'm hoping to be able to work out and hang out with the boys and get a lot of reading done, and I like to be able to come back and have the Bible finished so I can move on to my next book, but because it's a slog, we'll say. Like, it's very interesting. We can do a whole episode on the Bible and everything, but even just this first third, but I'm ready to read something else. And so I really like to try and take advantage of that, but to also stay in military mode a bit longer until it's actually done, until my weapon is back with the armor on base. Then I can really start to really bring myself back to civilian life, 100%.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. We're already hitting about an hour mark. Any other questions? Any nagging curiosities?
Other than the fact that I need to pour myself another whiskey after hearing everything that I just heard. But let's just say Dillon told the story a lot more cool, calm, and collected than I received the story. But I'm very...
I remember our first break after the first Mizzle Joblin thing. When I texted you, I said, our next episode, I got some juice.
A lot of content.
I hope I was able to deliver.
It's been a month and a half since our last episode, and we got a more than a year's worth of content. So definitely delivered quite well, Dillon.
Fantastic. All right. Well, guys, thank you for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode that kind of goes back to our normal political discussions about everything. And I think we can actually end this one for once on a good note. It feels like all of our podcasts end with, I know it sucks, but but this one, no, listen, I have to say, one of the reasons why I'm in as high spirits as I am is because, on the team, not even so much as a twisted ankle or a chipped tooth. Everybody came back healthy, alive, in one piece, and... Yeah, no, thank God, really, because it just takes one incident to change everybody's life, and we got very lucky, And I'm very, very grateful for that. And I'm grateful for the guys. I'm grateful for the great support I have back home from you and the rest of our friends and my family. You guys mean a lot. And yeah. All right, let's wrap it up because I'm getting sappy. I think it's the beer talking. So thank you again for listening, everybody, and we'll speak to you next time.
Be well.